he ran back to his house, felt the mangrove poles that supported it sway as he shot up the ladder. He sat down, spat in the ink boil to moisten it, picked up his quill, and what had he been about to write? He scanned the leaf he had left on the floor, hoping to find some clue in what he had written before, saw no connections in the list of words he had been writing. Searching his mind for the words he had inventoried that morning, he found even more were gone. It was more than him simply forgetting them, he realized. The language was eroding, an atoll being washed away by the ocean of Grand Salutayan. He would have to forego the conversation then, until the language was preserved. He laughed. What would be lost? No poetry had ever been written in Grand Salutayan. It was a deliberately simple language, shorn of all subtlety, a language of nothing but nouns and verbs, no genders, no tenses but now and not now, no pronouns but I and not I. It would do him no harm not to use it for a few days. Keluarga, to move to a new village. Ngantuk, to call out in one's sleep. Lunak, to search for something without finding it. As the night went on, though, he started to wonder just how long it would have to be. Even with all the words he had lost, he wondered if he could ever write down what was left. He had enough fish oil to burn his lamp for a night, maybe two. More urgently, he was nearly out of banana leaves to write on. Squinting, he made the letters as small as the tip of the hook would allow and began jotting apostrophes to separate words instead of spaces. Earlier, when he had devised his system of writing, he had not thought about space. Now he cursed his decision to use combinations of letters to represent sounds that did not exist in Grand Salutayan, rather than inventing new characters. He was netted now, though. A dictionary had to be consistent or it was useless. This much he had learned from Grand Salutayan. He kept writing, pushing himself to make the letters smaller and smaller. Hunched over the banana leaf on the floor, his arm held tightly to keep his strokes small, Sindiri's forearm jerked, scratching a line across the floorboard. He swore, drew the quill back to throw it across the room in anger when he saw that the ink had dried on the wood without smudging. Of course, he thought. What else would be a suitable record of the language he and Giuseppe had shared than the other thing that was theirs alone? Excited, he raised his arms to stretch his back, dipped the quill in the ink bowl, and began writing along the edge of the wall. He worked his way inward as dawn came and the daylight hours passed. He worked in silence as Taman once again came up the ladder, called his name, called again, and finally left. His quill scratched against the floorboards as he followed an inward spiral towards the center of the room, always trying to increase his pace, to write words down faster than they could be washed away by his mind's tide. Thunder made him look up. It was dark again. Lightning flashed through the holes in the thatch, illuminating the room for a moment. Focused on his work, he had not noticed the smell of rain in the air, the sound as it fell on the roof. Now, in the lightning's flare, he could see puddles sitting on the floor, smudging and washing away most of what he had written. He froze for a moment, rigid with anger. Then, too tired even to rage, Sindiri fell to the floor and let himself sleep. Asleep, he saw himself, sitting with Giuseppe in their boat, leaning against the palm stem gunnels on a calm sea. She was speaking, but the words made no sense, and he knew that he had at last forgotten their language entirely. He opened his mouth to speak, then felt something resting in his hand. Looking down, he saw that it was the book that he had been writing, containing every word the two of them had ever spoken. Flipping through the book, he tried to speak, to say one of the things he wished he had said, but all he could do was string words together. Giuseppe, now in a boat of her own, began to drift away. Sindiri called to her, but the words he read from the dictionary had no emotion and no reaction registered on her face. Even in its perfect state, he realized the book was just a record, a dead thing without the soul of a language. He woke from fevered dreams to see Taman sitting on the mat nearby, a bowl of water at his side. His friend rose to his knees and held out the bowl. "Have some of this," Taman said. "I think you've had a fever." "Thank you," Sindiri croaked, then took a drink. He felt a sharp pain as he sat up. The hook he had been using as a quill had stuck in his side, leaving a black ink spot when he plucked it out. "Why are you..." "You've missed 2 conversations," Taman said, "and you were moaning last night, loud enough your neighbors could hear. The talk is..." Sindiri nodded. He knew what the talk would be. Sometimes when a person dies, they take the souls of those they love with them to the sea floor. What's left is just a hantu, a dead, empty shell. To see or even talk to a hantu is dangerous, itself an omen of death. "Maybe I'm not alive," Sindiri said. "All that's worth saving is fading away." Taman frowned, gestured around at the smudged marks on the floor. "Is that what this was all about?" "It's useless. I realize that now," Sindiri said. "Even if I had all the words, it would be no more alive than a dried fish." He rubbed the spot where the hook had jabbed him with his thumb. The ink mark was still there, just under his skin. "It needs to live." Taman waited for his friend to continue, rose to his feet, but he did not. "Well, I shouldn't even be here. I hope you'll forgive me." He moved to the top step of the ladder and began climbing down. "No, wait," Sindiri said. "You have to help me. Help me keep her alive." "But you said..." "No, please, I have an idea. Help me." Taman paused at the top of the ladder. "Sindiri, you have to let go. I know how you feel, but you have to let go." Sindiri picked up the hook he had been using as a quill, held it up to show to Taman. "Please, just stay. Help me. You have to come out for the conversation. Today. One day. That's all." Taman took a breath, nodded. "All right," he said. Hadapi, to awake to one's lover's face. Kinta, to love truly. Menkintai, to love for the last time. At the end of the day, as the shadows reached over the main walkway, Sindiri rejoined the conversation. Many people turned to look, not only because of his absence, but because of the black marks that had appeared on his face, arms, and legs. Those nearby saw that the marks were letters pricked out under his skin, forming words that meant nothing even to those that could read Grand Salutan. Only he and Taman knew that the words, in fact, covered his entire body, arranged so that their location and position would represent the grammar of the language he and Kasepi had shared, the oldest root words along the spine, verbs on the muscles, every inch of skin recalling the meaning and inflection of a word. Despite the small commotion he was causing, Sindiri paid the ink marks little mind. The Salutanes have no mirrors or steel, and their sea is too dark to ever see a clear reflection, so he would never see the words Taman had scribed on his skin. That was not important, though. All that mattered was that they would not fade away, that they were still a living language.